Welcome to Harbinger's flagship interactive webinar, Power Hour. Select the right speaker for audio output. Test your speaker from audio settings. If necessary, join the webinar using your phone. Use the Q&A panel to share your questions. This webinar is being recorded. Attendees will receive the recording. Let's tune in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Harbinger Power Hour. Thank you for making the time to join us in discussing what we think is a very important topic. The Power Hour is a series of roundtables that Harbinger hosts, which discuss topics of organizational, technological, and economic import. Today's topic, we believe, is one such, and that is, how is learning and development and how is that function evolving in a market that is clearly getting disrupted? So how do you lead the shift as this disruption is occurring? And we have some terrific discussion lined up for you. My name is Avinash Lele. I'm known as Avi by my friends and colleagues. I'm a president at Harbinger Group, and I will be hosting this entire roundtable, Power Hour, as we call it. And let's start with the headlines. It's always good to know what the headlines are, and then we will craft the context and the discussion points from that point on. So here are the headlines, and we used a McKinsey study that spoke to the stuff that we want to talk about. The first headline is, the AI age will shape how all companies operate. The challenge lies in determining how to best use technology, including to truly simplify without losing the unique value that complexity offers, nor the ability for humans to engage with it. The second headline we thought is pertinent is, to cultivate organizational resilience and to ensure adaptability, companies will need to think differently about how teams are structured and managed. So, a lot to unpack in those two statements. A lot of insights that we can glean. So what is the game plan for today, given those headlines? So we will discuss the impact of AI on learning cycles, organizational preparedness, and competitive advantage. We will explore organizational design issues driven by AI. And again, we will use AI to understand how it is impacting learning and development, because we believe learning and development is going to be at the heart of the strategic change that enterprises and organizations want to bring into effect. And then we will examine the CIO, CHRO, and CLO dynamic to drive greater organizational effectiveness. So I've been an IT services, tech services guy for over 35 years. And over my career, I've noticed how the role of the CIO, which was essentially seen to be one of managing costs, has moved to the center, and more CIOs are becoming chief operating officers and CEOs. We think that the CLO function and the role is also going to, along with the CHRO, move towards closer to the center as tech begins to drive the learning and development agenda. So if that is true, what happens when AI comes calling? So some of the things include, people functions begin to operate as one, so silos dissolve. AI-enabled learning and coaching is practiced with greater frequency and breadth. And the agentic AI culture, it begins to demand soft skills. So while all attention is being paid on AI preparedness and Gen AI and how tech is becoming more and more powerful. We have to pay attention to skills like problem solving, adaptability, and collaboration in order to manage and in order to sort of take us to a safe and a good place. And again, that's an L&D agenda point. And the need to accentuate flexibility and resilience in organizations for competitiveness. So, things are shifting so fast and in such significant ways that we need to understand how to adapt and remain relevant and remain meaningful. So that I think is the broader challenge. A World Economic Forum report says that by 2030, technology and demographic shifts will displace 92 million jobs, but create 170 million new ones, a net increase of 78 million. And to stay relevant, 59% of workers will need upskilling or reskilling. So clearly, there are a set of new skills and competencies and tech savviness, if that's a word, in the form of machine learning, AI, big data, data analytics, software and application development. Those skills are going to be in significant demand. And I don't think as an economy and as organizations standing alone, there is a great sense of preparedness. And we are moving more and more towards a skills economy where the currency is going to be that of what skill do you bring to the engagement, to the workplace, and what kind of value are you driving? So with that as the context, let me introduce our terrific panel, both phenomenal individuals and professionals in their own right. Mike Dixon is the President and Chief Operating Officer of Hoops HR, an HR tech company based out of Dallas. He was a Senior Vice President for Learning and Development at Epsilon. And Sarthak Brahma, who is the founder and CEO of Hex Advisory Group. It's a strategy and sourcing advisory firm. It's a big player in the world of global capability centers, GCCs. And I'm going to hand over to both these gentlemen to just introduce themselves. So with that, Mike, will you introduce yourself in your own words and reflect on what the context has just been said?
Absolutely. So excited to be here. Great to do this. And just a quick note on my background. So spent some years in the military, capped that off teaching and coaching at West Point, and as I made the transition into the tech sector, started off with IBM, spent some time in consulting and really in the HR sourcing and process side, and then kind of went in-house after that. Now doing a more entrepreneurial thing with Hoops at the intersection of literally everything we're talking about today. And I think you referenced some wonderful points with McKinsey, and as I did my research in preparation for this, one of the things that jumped out to me is, hey, 95% of the survey respondents through a couple different offerings, McKinsey, a couple others have said, we're not getting ROI from our AI investment yet. And as we think about this and we think about, hey, HR, particularly L&D, is going to have to step up to the plate here. I'm really excited to explore this because this is going to be a transition period of haves and have-nots. And if you're not getting ahead of the curve today, you're going to be left behind very quickly with the acceleration. So yeah, looking forward to this. Looking forward to having the conversation with you and Sarthak. So this is exciting.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. And what a terrific background. I forgot about your West Point experience and the Army experience because we share a similar Army background. So
We do,
It
yes.
always helps. It always helps when, battle lines are drawn, and I think there a new battle line has been drawn in so many ways. Sarthak, a few words from you about you.
Yeah, people can look me up on LinkedIn, so I'll keep this very short. The founder of the practices sourcing, shoring, which is GCCs, and benchmarking capabilities at Everest Group, followed by W Group, then selling ourselves to Wavestone, a French firm, heading that, and then eventually consolidating all the practices into one, and then buying out certain components of that practice, including the India operations, and making it Hex Advisory Group, which is now almost coming to 3 years as an independent firm. And most notably, both the airlines in Dallas are now serviced by Hex, including their GCC setups, which made the public domain in India recently. So that's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic, and congratulations on your successes. It's remarkable that you have managed to create such a strong voice in a almost what I call a legacy industry, and it's a fresh take on adding value. So my best to you. So Mike, I'm going to start with you. As somebody who has operated on the cusp of AI disruption, how do you see traditional CLO responsibilities undergo a change? I mean, I was just thinking about you, and I said, if there is a term called the AI millennial, you would be it. I mean, you're at the cusp of AI and before AI. So maybe we've just given birth to a brand new term and you're the first beneficiary. So tell us, how does it feel? You're on mute.
There I go. I'm off mute now. All right, that's helpful. I act like I've done this before. I think my kids would say I'm too old to be thrown in the millennial category, but I'll take it. I love it. We'll go forward. Look, I think applies to L&D in a very dramatic fashion. And if you look at the disruption in the industry, the acquisition of Pluralsight by Vista Private Equity, and then the step away from that very quickly is AI commoditized the space. We used to talk a lot about content development, curation, and the administrative and compliance management for L&D. The days of being an admin gatekeeper and creating content, they're over. They ended about a year and a half ago. So the question now is, how does an L&D leader make sense of what's going on and bring immediate bottom line impact to an organization with AI, especially if we're saying 95% of folks aren't achieving that? And to me, that's, if you are an L&D leader, if you're an HR leader, you need to be focused on aim small, miss small. Okay. Extra credit to folks who know what movie that came from. But it's this idea of you need to pick out something very discreet and understand, particularly in the difficult economic circumstances a lot of organizations are in, how am I using that to take immediate costs out of my operation to repurpose them for other strategic initiatives and show value? So what do I mean by this is, if you are trying to train people on AI, do you have a low cost, quality source of interactive training that you can use? Okay, why is this really important? Because there's a ton of good research out there, and Pluralsight's actually conducted some of this, which is really ironic. We have many folks in the technology sector that are feigning experience with AI right now. They're hoping to fake it till they make it. But yet, if we survey them, most workers will tell us they don't have a high quality, secure source of AI training content, for example. So if I'm an L&D leader, I need to be working with my CIO. I need to be working with my product engineering team to say, how do we solve this problem immediately and get the organization set up for success on quality training sources? Because otherwise the skills gap is just going to continue to widen. We've got to bring a degree of strategic honesty. The other thing is this whole idea of these massive L&D platforms, the systems of systems, and I won't say any brand names so I don't hurt anyone's feelings. But a lot of those are going to go away and they're going to be out engineered, and I think Harbinger's been at the forefront of this. because you can connect a lot of things very quickly now. And you can put automation, you can put all sorts of AI tools in place that are going to provide a better, more personalized, much more highly interactive experience than a lot of these gigantic platforms that we were locked into multi-year software agreements with. And I think we're on the very leading edge of that. So if I'm an L&D leader and I think my magic ticket is going to be buying and implementing a gigantic learning management system with a bunch of pre-made content in it, nope. I think that's a non-starter. And if I'm a CIO, I'm going to have a hard time taking an L&D leader seriously if they come in with that.
Swell.
We'll see, how many angry comments I get from LinkedIn back on this.
Yeah. No. Angry means, people are listening and paying attention, and we are making a difference. So with picking up on that, Sarthak, as a strategic advisor to large enterprises, how has AI weaved itself in from an organizational and technological transformation point of view? I mean, is the construct around GCC also in some ways, or can it also be seen as a reflection of the change that needs to be wrought for greater effectiveness, ability to scale? It's a broad, open-ended question, but there it is.
Yeah, I mean, so two aspects to that. First and foremost is L&D actually the strategic forethought, or is it an afterthought? And unfortunately, the answer is the latter. There are not many CIOs or COs or CFOs or CHROs who are willing to give it credence unless they are staring at the abyss before any big transformation program. So now that said, how should an enterprise be thinking about AI? Very simply put, there are if I were to put it on an XY plot, then the question is there are certain things wherein you over-index on a technology-first AI. That is where you need to index into the managed services construct, move towards the hyperscalers, etc. Then the other one is the talent ownership context, which is where you are now investing in building a talent pool, reskilling, which is the entire thing about harvesting and curating and synthesizing talent. Do enterprises think of their entire portfolio disposition on this simple XY quadrant, or even start a journey, whether it's a third party versus GCC, with this simple premise? The answer is no. And that is why from time to time, there is a requirement for advisors like us to just first, before walking the walk, take a step back and see what you've got. Now, with that said, one of the key things, picking up from what was just said by Mike, is what is essentially happening, right? What is happening is when we are talking about AI, the execution component, and that too for the low skilled things, is becoming cheaper. But by corollary, the things which are becoming more expensive are capability, because in essence, you are taking a typical pyramid and you're starting to agentify the lower end, the low value tickets, so to say, the transactional components out and put it into the agentic world. But that means now the things are moving up as they need to be reskilled, or the talent pool, the deficit between supply and demand, all of that becomes more accentuated at the top end. And so now what we are facing when we set up GCCs or retained footprints or onshore COEs is that entire capability versus capacity gap. Capacity being agentified, but duress on capability. What makes a capability? It is L&D. It is that fabric of how do you reskill, how do you redeploy your people. And that is the key aha thing that enterprises need to take stock of. And it's always invariably, once you walk the paces, you then realize, oops, we should have thought about this earlier. I'm going to take a pause, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, I'm going to actually ask you a follow on, because I think Hex was the one which introduced the notion of understanding how learning underpins knowledge transfer, and how knowledge transfer is almost a sort of a prerequisite and a forethought rather than afterthought in
Yeah.
in planning big moves and creating capability centers. So, are you advocating for greater collaboration between CIOs, CHROs, CLOs? I've met CLOs over the last 3 years, and one thing that I find when I speak to them is, they want a seat at the strategy table. They want more face time or mind share with the CEOs. And I think the
Yeah.
CEOs may be missing a trick by not paying attention to something like this. So that's my view. Sarthak, what do you think about it?
No, yeah, spot on. I think first and foremost, a lot of the large enterprise mandates are devoid of CLO intervention to begin with. And that is the issue that I was mentioning, right? It's that classic afterthought. So in most organizations, this entire thing about treating L&D as a strategic infrastructure for transformation is entirely missing. Now, with that said, the question is, should that be avoided? The answer is hell yes. Because again, like I said, if you look back to the history of managed services, whether it's staff aug, managed services, basically outsourcing, or even the former legacy captives or GICs and their different avatars they were called. What was it? It was basically labor arbitrage driven, which means it was capacity slash commodity that you were transferring. So L&D was relegated to a very transactional coaching and training that, say, a help desk agent or a customer service agent was required. But today, what are the new avatars, the ways these are being set up? Capability centers. So they were arbitrage centers, the former avatars, the last 25 years. Now we are calling them capability centers. What is the core distinction between capacity and capability? It is nothing but knowledge, right? And so it is as commonsensical as that. And therefore, I find it very ironical that every enterprise is talking about GCCs. It's a flash in the pan. Everyone is swinging that bat. But the question is, have you even thought about this basic difference between what the prior avatar was and this? And the bridge is basically making sure that your L&D fabric is there. And therefore, if the answer is yes, and we all agree, it's a strategic infrastructure to capability building, whether you do it in-house, in an offshore GCC, or in a third party, then the thing which gels it all together is a L&D fabric.
Excellent. Mike, what do you think about this? I mean, more collaboration with CDOs, CIOs. I mean, should they just get more tech savvy? Sometimes I find them quoting from books which are actually old, not old in terms of the wisdom, but in terms of the currency. I mean, so what's going on here?
Yes. So there's a point that, both you and Sartik kind of peripherally touched on, I think is really important is should L&D have a seat at the table in these strategic discussions?
Yeah.
I turn that around and I say to L&D leaders, and former big company L&D leader here at a global enterprise, hey,
Yeah.
you've got to earn a seat at the table. Nothing is given in corporate leadership. And when we talk about soft skills before, that you started off the discussion with, we've seen a steady, not even steady, we've seen a dramatic erosion of soft skills for a number of reasons. Personal pet peeve, but corporate leadership capability is at an all-time low. We got used to buying talent on the market. We got used to zero interest rate phenomenon in a lot of regions. And so we got sloppy and we didn't invest in building that talent, particularly that soft skill over the long term. I won't mention it, but literally there's a Fortune 5 CHRO a few years ago that said, we're going to stop developing talent. We can just get whatever we need on the open market. Tell me how that's working out right now in terms of getting AI talent. So I say all of that to say L&D leaders have got to sharpen their strategic credentials, come in with arguments tied, I believe, in the short term to bottom line improvements. You need to show, hey, here's how this AI initiative is going to increase EBIT. And if you can't, or you're not sure what EBIT means, you got to figure that out very quickly. Because in order to be a trusted partner, you've got to be understanding how you help strategically drive the business. So I'm passionate about that piece. If we take that further, I think there's a real, you mentioned this with the transition of CIOs. And Sartek very adroitly discussed the evolution of kind of offshoring and the GCC capability. Folks need to look at the demographics and understand, particularly when we talk about India, that's the future source. That's the current source, and that's the future source of most of the world's computer science talent. And it's got both volume, it's got both high potential, high performing capacity. So this whole idea, yeah, I think we've moved well beyond labor arbitrage to that may be the emerging source of a lot of critical talent. And if you don't have a foothold in that market, if you don't have a capability you've built and can leverage there, you may be left behind. And that goes particularly for L&D leaders. If we've democratized knowledge, then you ought to be able to go to, a place where you can get a tremendous amount of high quality knowledge and capability at a competitive price point. I won't say lowest because it's not. But I think there's some really interesting arguments there if you're truly shopping around globally for talent and capability to bring to the table as a strategic partner. The last piece I'll say in this is quoting the books. We are going to be able to, we can do this now. We can look at a lot of leaders. We can give you a personality assessment and we can find out some good research-backed capabilities about you. Learning aptitude is going to be a discriminator for strategic leadership and organizations. So if I'm an L&D leader and I don't know how to get up to speed on something, I need to figure out how to become Neo in the Matrix very quickly and to set up that capability for my organization's leadership. Because I'm quoting from old books. If I don't have the latest and greatest, the pace of change with AI is so dramatic. And a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where if you're not a value add to your leadership with up-to-date knowledge, with some future forecasting tied to the financials, you're going to be irrelevant and you're going to be replaced.
Yeah. Yeah. I should tell CIOs that CIOs will take up your jobs if you don't get savvy. And that scared a few.
Congrats.
I didn't make many friends.
Here's my CLO avatar. We fully automated that role. Congrats.
So I was going to ask Mike this question, but I'm going to ask Sarthak. So this issue of scaling the workforce, which is an L&D challenge. I think this new enthusiasm around the GCC construct may indeed be a potential answer to the scaling issue, because scaling is going to be important. Is that something that has come up in your deliberations?
Yeah, it's not, see, again, I don't talk brands, I talk experience. So it's easy to come up with trends, right? 70% think, 90% believe. But the fact is, like if I were to tell you from the 10 that we have done, what the issues are, then that is, in my mind, much more real. So to your point, scaling is not a theoretical concept. Scaling is a present day issue. 75% of the new GCCs, 3 out of 4 GCCs which have been set up in India, the hotbed of talent right now, are facing scaling issues. They are not able to do a trajectory per their scaling aspirations. And we build the upstream business models. Now, why is that? And picking up from another thing that Mike said, right? The issues are, first and foremost, the entire initiative, that entire thing I said, what goes where, is so hodgepodge, so haphazard, it has not been thought of. Because essentially, when we are moving certain stuff, and so think of it as 2 arms, right? Today, your IP, your fabric, your knowledge resides either in an outsourced basis, like Mike was saying, heavily outsourced, and God forbid if it's a hyper fragmented portfolio, that means it's all over and nowhere. And then the question is, now you're trying to set up a GCC, so you want to incubate, bring in that talent autonomy, IP autonomy in-house. So by virtue of that, there is a need to, first of all, defragment. That means consolidate everything that is lying across your current vendor pool. That means there is a certain amount of KT and bringing it onto a common knowledge fabric required. Then Then the idea is, can I now create an umbilical cord between this existing know-how? And some of them, by the way, a lot of these Fortune 500s also rely on a lot of contractor base, which are 1099 sitting in the US or UK or wherever, who are probably past expiration date anyways, a lot of these people. So the idea is creating a consolidated fabric which first funnels all this information which is lying all around. Then the next thing is, how do you tether it to a knowledge fabric so that tomorrow when you give rise to this baby in India or Philippines or wherever you're setting up your GCC, Costa Rica, where have you, then they can very quickly dip into this knowledge fabric and therefore can scale way faster than today it takes to train one agent or one live flesh and blood person. And therefore, the L&D initiative to me is something which is ubiquitous. It is a necessity to any transformation, and yes, to a GCC. Another thing, India right now, if you look at it, is largely what? An asymmetry of information and people. 1,500 people, 2,000, 3,000. In the case of JP Morgan, just 60,000 people sitting in one geography. However, compare that with the GCCs that we are setting up in Europe. They are a talent anywhere, talent everywhere kind of a model, right? Now,
Nice.
yes, and that is again something Mike touched upon. But now the beauty is, and what is talent anywhere? Because at the end of the day, you do not require, I can almost foresee in 3 years from now when people would have burnt because of no-show rates and scaling talent costs and everything. The talent anywhere model will become real. That means I could collaborate with somebody sitting in Costa Rica and Philippines and across, but working on the same project. How do you think that's going to happen? It is going to happen, and it's happening with certain companies who are over-indexed on technology for an L&D. It means that essentially scope disposition on what goes where is dictated by business as a product. Each function, today everything is amorphous. If you look at L&D as a product, sales as a product, baggage handling as a product, then you know whether I'm today dependent on outside or internal, or do I have the L&D? And once you have that, that means you're creating a productized version of scope and where it's going. Second thing is, therefore, converting that requirement into a capability module of what, therefore, you require from a capability standpoint is the CHRO/CLO's job. And then finally, how do you deliver it at speed through IoT, through an AI fabric? That is the CIO's job. Now, these are not three separate roles in my mind, and maybe there could be three separate roles, but they need to come up as one full stack if you want it to be a ubiquitous talent anywhere or a knowledge anywhere kind of a model. And I don't even know what the percentage is, but I can wager, at least in my experience, 90-95% of organizations are not that well orchestrated today, and therein lies the issue.
No, fantastic. Actually, that's a terrific way of thinking about mobilization and application of talent. I mean, we have to think past narrow geographies in fashioning the solutions that we actually seek. I was just reflecting on what Sarthak was saying. You almost need a new learning culture, if it is a term. I mean, so how do you facilitate learning? So it's a different kind of a question and a theme that I'm trying to pick up on now, post what Sarthak just said. So as an L&D leader, you've got to be worried as to how to first scale. And once you scale, how to, because that's the soft skill, the collaboration skill, the problem solving skill. So it's a huge challenge. I would have some sleepless nights, Mike.
Yep.
What about
Yes.
you?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this. This is something we tackled when I was with Epsilon. And, very early on at Epsilon, we realized that the capabilities we had in Bangalore were far greater than we imagined. But there were a whole number of issues to bring that we needed to have global learning. We needed to break down the silos where folks said, this is what you do, this is what I do. We just hand over work over a 24-hour period. That's it. Have to get collaborative to the point on soft skills. So the number one thing is, how do adults learn? They learn by doing. So I like to see an L&D leader that works with IT, that works with product engineering, that works with infrastructure to say, how do we get hackathons together? how do we get live events, various time zones, some continuous and discontinuous learning where we're getting groups to collaborate together? That's number one. And in the, the plus side is you may solve a few real world company problems at the same time, which is a nice bonus. I think also is looking at the learning and training pipelines, assembling key content, and starting to think, how do I create advanced learning in an organization? One of the great partnerships we had that I loved was we were doing a lot of work with Databricks, but we needed to make sure we had people that were in the room that really understood the power of that product and how to do it. We did some of that with AWS too. So putting in place asynchronous tracks of learning and practical experiences to get into the room with these distinguished engineers from these vendors, you're going to need to get through X, Y, and Z. So that by the time all those folks from anywhere get into that virtual room, they're well qualified to participate in the work and to really share ideas and take things to the next level. So kind of pre-qualifying the best and brightest and getting them in there. That's step two. And there's so much goodness that comes from that. There's so much recognition. There's so much product advancement. There's so much capability advancement. But you've got to level the playing field and say, hey, if you meet the qualifications, you can be in this room. Don't care where you're based. And being respectful of different time zones and cultural boundaries and saying, hey, we're going to schedule these things at a time. They may be slightly uncomfortable for two different continents, but overall, everybody can get there. Except for Australia. Sorry. But, is the third and final thing of this is, and this is the elephant in the room, I believe, when it comes to AI, and it touches on the soft skill piece, is leaders are going to have to take a look at their talent globally and really establish the metrics. Look at the absolutely top 10 to 15% of most critical roles in the organization and figure out how am I adequately resourcing those roles with the right training, the right development, the right coaching, the right skills expansion. Because those are the folks that are going to achieve outsized returns. And globally, I want to be able to identify those folks and say, just because you're an SVP in this company doesn't mean you're in a critical role. But if you're the one person that's running the data lake for our key cloud product, you may be one of the most critical roles in the company. So that's step 3 is the talent management piece, and I'll stop because I could go all day on that one.
No. I mean, we have all day actually. I'm just, but I mean, we can continue to talk even after this. But so, I was just thinking about the fact that a few years ago, I attended the advanced management program at Wharton. And they teach you a lot of really, really interesting and important stuff. But I'm wondering whether curriculum needs to change for people to step into senior executive roles, to think of new problem-solving approaches and designs. I don't know if that speaks to you, Sarthak, but it just came to me that, are we ill-prepared for this moment?
Yeah, so there are two aspects to L&D, right?
Yeah.
We talked a lot, Mike and I, about the people aspect. How do you reskill people, retrain people, right? And make sure that, and the scaling component of people, which is all true. What we miss out is the importance of L&D even for agentification, AI agentification, right? Now, here is the thing. Today, most enterprises, barring few banks who are building their own LLMs, largely what they are doing is they are creating agents which are grounded that with domain specificity and context of their know-how, so that they can go and ping LLMs like OpenAI or whatever and make it relevant for their industry. How do you think grounding of an agentic AI agent happen? It happens because of domain specificity. Where is that domain sitting today? Either in people's heads or in relinquished to SharePoints and whatnot. So how do you make your agents, AI agents, smarter? by uploading, getting them grounded. Where is that grounding going to happen? From the L&D powerhouse and how technology meets your sources. So it is not just a people part of the equation. It is the AI agentification also. So your digital agents require L&D as much as your flesh and blood agents, right? Or the seniors. So now with that first said, now let's talk about your question, which is what it means for the executives and how do they need to, see. So essentially, creativity has no replacement. Context has no replacement. Both of these components, and this is the only thing which will keep us human, because if you are not on this index, creativity and context, that means experience, then the digital agent can do your job. So which automatically means that I have to repurpose myself. Each one of us needs to do that. To repurpose yourself, we need to, always stay on the forefront of learning and development. So I think that is going to change. However, how we consume L&D, I think, is changing a lot. Earlier, if you remember, we all grew up in the 90s. So big Bibles, you read, then you take a training, all of that. So I think right now we are at that cusp, and the generational impact it's a very dopamine, hit ready kind of a consumption, right? So I think the intent is how do you make L&D very easily ingestible, so that the dopamine hit, the same thing that you get from scrolling on reels and stuff, is the way you want to consume things. It is because of two things. One is paucity of time and just the way we consume things. I think that is where our curriculum and the way things are packaged are still very old school versus to how we now beginning to consume it ourselves. Forget the new generation. So I think that bridge, and that is where I see the role of the CLO coming to the forefront, because I can't expect a CIO to tell me how a curriculum should be engineered or worked so that it has the highest impact. And it is not the HR's job. So it is, so getting, like I said, a full stock orchestration on how, scope translates to a capability or a curriculum build out to how it translates to a technology, and getting it all together so that eventually you are arming both your digital agents and flesh and blood agents at speed, at scale. That is the nature of the CLO's job. So utopian, if you ask me, but I hope we get, because if not, then we'll just succumb.
Yeah. No, I asked that question because I was envisaging your role almost to be one of an educator also. It's not just, I mean, you're forcing people to think.
Tell me about it.
Is that true?
Obviously, Avi, because the point is, I age twice as fast, not because of the technology or solutioning aspect. It's because of the people aspect of my business. Getting people on the same page to just on these commonsensical things, it's Herculean. So totally with you.
Excellent. Mike, have you discussed in your sort of L&D role new ways of designing the org structure? That I mean, is it a backwater? Is it right in the center where it should be? Are people, getting it? I mean, it's a loaded question, but no better person to ask than you. So
okay. Hugely loaded question right now. And, these spans and layers nightmare org design has come back with a vengeance, strictly as a tool right now to cut headcount. And we can go into a lot of that, but is a true organizational analysis, I think it's really lacking. So if we're talking about designing an organization, this is one of those cases where we need to look back in history and find something that worked. I love the grippy model. So kick it all the way back to MIT and General Electric in the 70s, I believe. So very simple: goals, roles, processes, and procedures, and interpersonal relationships. It's a good way to assess a team too. GRPPI. But if we step back for a sec and we also have to combat this whole idea of a flat leaderless organization, which all it does is embed complexity at the front line of an organization where it's least equipped to deal with it. It's a cool story. It rarely works. Fun fact, a lot of times you find a micromanaging senior founder leader that's running the whole thing and about to have a breakdown. That's not scalable. But when we look at organization design, I go back to the Grippy model and I say, all right, number one, what's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish? Because that drives a lot of different things. And we can have, is this an organization that's focused on top line growth? Is this an organization that's focused on market share? Is this an organization that's focused on taking margin out of an existing mature business? Let's be real honest and clear what we're trying to do first. Because, and I love Sardik's comment about alignment of leaders, because you'll get a variety of corporate leaders that'll come in. We see this with our clients. Chief Revenue Officer has one idea, CIO has another, and COO has a third.
Yep, there you go.
And it's like, hey, gang, I'm looking at your publicly available financial statements, and I think all through you may be off base, but it's like there's a degree of strategic alignment there that really needs to happen, and Grippy forces that. So tell me what we're trying to solve for with the goal. Roles. We really, really need to go to this idea of experiences, I believe, not my idea, freely stolen from other areas. But I want to get leaders into this perspective of measurable experiences. Okay. When we're talking about an org design. So if you would like to have an organization that is able to repurpose thousands of workers, be they 1099 employees, et cetera, and you want to retrain them, it's really good to look around and say, can we hire someone with that experience who has retrained a bunch of people? Not necessarily an expert in AI, but somebody who understands the change management and has some successful metrics on how they transition thousands of workers. Because that's provable. We can measure it. And we know there are folks out there that have done that successfully. They're rare, but they exist. And then we need to get into the process and the procedure a little bit. Too often what I see with AI in organizations is we go right to the process and the procedure. We're going to slap some kind of AI technology on it and hope for the best. This last piece, highly underrated, the interpersonal relationships. We can talk about this. I'm going to insert a couple passionate points in here because I believe in leadership development done the right way over time. But there is a dearth of quality leadership in a lot of organizations right now. We got rid of a lot of leadership development training decades ago. We got rid of a lot of things like national service that were a requirement that taught people a lot of basic organizational leadership and collaboration skills. We got rid of a lot of things, especially for this generation coming to the workforce, where they were in live events collaborating with each other, be it regular youth sports, be it scouting. A lot of the participation's way off for a lot of those things. So we have all these people that come into the workforce. They're slave to their devices. They don't necessarily know how to interact with people. And it's a huge challenge. So when you talk about org design, you have to take that into account. If you want your two data scientists to talk to each other, you may have to teach them how to talk to each other. I'm not kidding. I mean, that's no exaggeration.
Yeah.
But when you take all these things together and you start to triage them down the stack from an org design perspective, you need to understand exactly the roles you want on a team in a function, how they're working, and how they're interrelating to each other, and scorecard that and be able to drive that. And very few leaders in an organization truly understand how to do that. And I think very few consultancies understand how they help build a new organization from scratch in this environment for success. So I love the question.
Spot
And I
on.
think there's a
Spot on.
ton.
I think,
Well, lovely.
yeah, and just to add to what Mike said, right?
Yeah.
So think about it this way. When we are setting up a GCC, which is a completely new baby, somebody is giving birth. And when we talk about our mandate, it is very commonplace to see that there are employee handbooks, localized policy, manuals, protocols, cultural trainings, everything is packaged, prepackaged, and Indian or whatever localized GCC versions are created, right? How many times do we see that curriculums, which is where you want to head, is prefabricated and is a part of that initial build for a GCC, so that we also have a curriculum agenda for senior leaders we are hiring as well as for junior leaders we are having? How common is it for me as an advisor to see it, or any GCC to have it day one of operationalizing it? The answer is I'm yet to see it. I've spent 27 years in this industry.
Yep.
When was the last time I saw a
Yep.
GCC, and way back from the captive build, which I
Yeah.
like back then, it was not capability. Today is capability. So in my mind, you should be working on building that curriculum modules and exactly what needs to come as part of your day one, but it doesn't happen. And therein lies exactly what Mike is saying, that the reality versus aspiration are two different things. And therefore, the manifestation is that 3 out of 4 are not scaling, their capability curves are bad. And then it's very easy to blame the model. It's very easy to say, oh, third-party model is bad, or your GCC is bad, or our vendor is bad, or our contract is bad. Hell no. Smart buyers, smart organizations beget smart solutions. And if you are not getting it in today's market, today's technology landscape, then the problem is in the mirror. It's not to do with the landscape. It's about how well you orchestrated it or chose not to.
So I'm going to bring in my colleague Subodh to talk a little bit about how Harbinger is looking at this entire issue. Subodh is the head of our solutions business. Subodh, you want to take it away?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, first of all, thank you, Abhi, Mike, Sarthak. I think I've been listening to this conversation. It's been fascinating. This is a super important topic, and I think they would have thoroughly enjoyed what they have heard so far. So here's how Harbinger team, they look at this particular problem. So we have tried to put it in some kind of a graphic, but maybe I'll explain the thought process behind it. So most of the L&D teams today, they were built on a world where skill was changing very slowly. It was very predictable. It was extremely curriculum driven. And the mandate was straightforward back then, like create courses, update them periodically whenever compliance changes, whenever certain requirements change, distribute them across the workflows, do some assessments, tick a checkbox, and be done with it. Now, with fundamental changes like AI that is coming, these rules, they need to be rewritten. And so the skills, they need to be changed far more faster. They're going to be more volatile. They're going to be complex. And employees, they're going to need these new capabilities. They're going to need new manuals, new ways of working in a few months. And previously, it perhaps used to be like a couple of years after which things used to change. And so organizations, they now need to shift from running learning programs to something like managing a continuous capability engine. And that's where we have sort of coined this term, where they need to move from a curriculum mill kind of a mindset, where they were producing batches of training, to something where it is more skill oriented. And there are different ways in which this can be achieved. So one has to always sense what are the emerging skill demands that the business is getting. Then how can that content be activated really very quickly? What kind of training needs to be organized? What tools are there that can be deployed rapidly so that this training or this learning can happen quickly? Where all AI can be used in this? What's the automation need? Tremendous amount of data is collected by these teams, but hardly any of it gets used. So because lot more focus is on manual and instructional design of it. So where does the AI, automation, and data play come in? That's another aspect to think about. And most importantly, sort of operationally equip the organization to scale this enterprise-wide skill transformation without doing any major disruption to operations. So that's how what we have been talking with different customers and prospects. That's the common perspective that's coming out. And this gap between the conventional L&D structure and the skill-based L&D, if you may want to call it that way, the gap is widening, and it's widening very, very quickly. And if businesses don't re-architect themselves around this new notion of how a skill-based L&D is going to look like, they are going to fall behind. They won't be able to compete in this marketplace. So with that, we can now start thinking about what makes this kind of a change possible. And it on the face of it, it appears to be very big. So this is where these Harbinger L&D extension centers, they come in. So they are designed to help organization make this leap from a curriculum mill to a true skills engine. And these centers, they are built for scale, they are built on specialization, they are built for speed. And the intent is to use these latest technologies in order to counter some of these demands that are coming up. So, for example, AI, it amplifies the learning demands, the speed in which this learning needs to happen. So, the way we can visualize these extension centers are on three primary aspects. So, one is the scalability. So, a CLO organization, they can now benefit from having a large blended team of learning experts, technologists, subject matter experts who are working seamlessly with each other in a harmony in an instant capacity. So they don't need like a huge amount of time to scale up. The big change over here is the whole modernization and AI enablement aspect. So everything from transforming the legacy content that exists in form of PDFs, classroom sessions, and so on. How can it be used for building skill intelligence layers? What automations are needed? How learning technologies can be used rather than just having PowerPoint-based courses or paper manuals being used. And on the operational backbone side of it, there is going to be a tremendous increase in how this thing needs to be achieved. So right from support, content orchestration, pilot programs, ongoing operations, and so on. So in a nutshell, if I were to summarize this, the extension center now becomes like an engine room of the whole L&D strategy, allowing internal teams to focus more on vision, aligning L&D to what the goals are, whereas leaving the execution aspects to these extension centers. So that's how Harbinger has been visualizing. So Avi, over to you.
Thank you, Subodh. Thank you. That was outstanding. And it actually almost sums up both the problem and a potential solution to what we're trying to solve. So thank you so much for that. I have a final slide because this is a paid advertisement, as they say. I'm the president of Harbinger, so I just want the participants in the world to know that we are over 35 years old. We build products and solutions that transform the way people work and learn. 850 plus, 35% of our executive team is female, so we're very proud of that. Awarded a bunch of key awards in our history. We serve the human resources, HR tech, HCM sector, the e-learning sector, digital publishing, and of course high tech. And with that, I want to ask the audience if they have a question, because we just have one question that we can answer in the last 1 minute. If not, I think we had a phenomenal conversation today. I want to sincerely thank Sarthak and Mike for participating, making time to join something that is very close to what we are trying to solve for. We have one particular question. I don't know if we have time for that. We have always known GCCs to be support functions to the parent organization, but how can we ensure GCCs add strategic value? 30 seconds, Sarthak. And they can follow up with us, and they can follow up with you and I, later. But
Yeah, I
you,
mean, on LinkedIn and all. See,
yeah,
again,
the last word to you.
yeah, how can we ensure GCC add more strategic value? It cannot happen in the GCC. For it to be able to add a strategic value to me as a parent, I mean, by me, I mean the enterprises. The enterprises need to have very clear line of sight of what I want from my child and when. And many a times it's the misplaced expectations and and misdirected operational cues which result in GCCs not adding the right value because your value articulation was unclear for the baby to take shape. So I'll leave it at that. And in closing, just one other thing for you, Avi, and all the other L&D fraternity. We over-index on the scholarly aspect and the greater than good aspects of L&D. Many a times it does not fall on the right ears. I would implore upon folks like you and Mike, and I don't claim to be you, right? I'm just, again, just an orchestrator. My job is to make sure that I would say that L&D, if you can start pivoting to L&D being the only way to lower the cost for capability build per FTE, that means you create a FinOps aspect, and which is a fact, right?
Yep.
India is an overheated market. Either you keep paying more and more than the next guy to buy the talent, or you build a lower cost resource into a talent. Now, if I'm smart enough and I'm an advisor or I'm a CFO, I would like that latter, right? So I would say it's a FinOps mindset of selling our L&D and L&D fabrics and this entire change, which is missing. We over-index on people just taking it for the greater good, and that never happens. So with that, thank you so much for having me.
The
It was a
final
pleasure being with
word,
you
but
and
it was a
Mike.
fantastic piece of almost wisdom is what I would say, Sarthak. So thanks again, Mike. Thank you so much. Subodh, fantastic, and the team that put this together. Sincere thanks.